Welcome back to Mid-Tier Thoughts, everybody. As you can see, we are back in the garage, back to operations as normal. So let's go ahead and just dive on in. But before we do, make sure you check out the link in the description down below to get your 20% off your first order of Blackout coffee. For those of you who have already been doing that, you've been a huge help to the show, helping support us and be able to let us get the things that we need to keep this show running. So with that, guys, you are awesome. The coffee's awesome, and they support your Second Amendment rights at the same time. So go check them out. Help them, help us, help you. Help everybody all the way around. So, speaking of buying things, what are we talking about today? We're talking about excessive consumerism in the gun space, right? So, there's been this trend for a long time on YouTube, especially in the Guntube space, of this constant push to buy. And I will admit, like straight out of the gate, I have had companies hit me up to send me stuff. I've had, the affiliate links, things like that. Right? We're all guilty of it. If you have any type of social media, YouTube space where someone's sending you something, we're all kind of somewhat guilty of, pushing a certain product one way or the other. Right? I try in my videos to be very upfront and honest with people and be like, hey, look, this company sent me this. I'm going to give you my honest thoughts on this. If you buy it, great. If not, whatever. This isn't my full-time job. This is a hobby that happens to trickle in $1 or $2 every couple months, right? Just putting that out there. I want to acknowledge the potential hypocrisy before I dive into my argument. So with that being said, I think there's a lot of us that have been in the gun space long enough know that there's this constant push to always purchase the next big thing, whether that be optics, gear, rifles themselves, different types of ammo, new magazines, whatever it is. There's always this push to buy, right? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that in and of itself, and this idea that like, hey, I've got a new product, I want to push it out to you, I'd like you guys to buy it. I mean, that's a very common thing, and that is a very common thing in any industry. And I don't fault gun companies for doing that. I don't fault even influencers for doing that, right? Some of these guys who are doing this as a full-time job, which believe me, that would be ideal. I would love just to make YouTube videos and podcasts like this for you guys daily and make that my job, but it's not. That's not reality. But for those guys who it is, guys like Grand Thumb, things like this, right? People who, even smaller channels, making somewhat decent money or somewhat notoriety out of it, like Trench Grenade or Grand Thumb, some of the admin results and things like this, right? Like, yeah, there might be a little bit of incentive to like push a product because it's your job, right? I get that. I totally understand. You're a business. You're in the business of making money and entertaining people. I totally understand that is how you operate. With that being said, I think there are some things that get put out there a lot of times that are not necessarily misinformation, but like this push to like buy this or you're not ready. If you don't have this product, you're going to die. Like very aggressive marketing. And I kind of just wanted to address some of that and say like, what are the alternatives to this that are out there, right? So for example, almost every Black Friday coming around, you see nods go on a really deep sale, and a couple days beforehand, you get people being like, "If you don't have nods, you're gonna die. You're a liability. So if you don't have nods, like you're no good, right?" Then you got the same people. Oh, if you don't have thermal, you're gonna die. If you don't have thermal, you're useless. You're basically useless. You're gonna die. If you don't have this kill flash product, the enemy is gonna immediately see you. If you don't have this light cover, they're gonna flash a light in the woods and immediately find you. There's always like this. If you don't buy my product, you're going to die. Kind of emphasis on the marketing. And granted, like in this industry, I understand that probably works really well because we're all kind of like preppery, Minuteman style minded. Be like, ooh, I want to be available for every contingency. I want to be prepared for all across the board. What can I do? What can I do that's gonna help eliminate threats, right? And you got people like, oh, if you don't have this, like if you don't have this radio, they're gonna immediately find out where you're at, and they're gonna triangulate your position and just drop mortars on you, blah blah blah, whatever. And it sounds really good from a marketing standpoint, and I think it's effective in what it does from the marketing side because we do see like, look, everyone's going out and buying the cool new thing. And sometimes it's not even the aggressive marketing, but it's just like, the concept of like that mad drip, like you want to have the most tricked out rifle. You want to have, you people are doing top mounted red dots now. I want to get a top mounted red dot. Oh, we're doing 8.T1s or 8.T2s. I want a T2. You want to be like that cool guy on Instagram that's got all the cool gadgets like everybody else does in this like thing to where like, it's either going to buy you notoriety or skill. Is this kind of mindset where people think I'm either going to get cool points out of it, or maybe I'll be an actual better shooter because I spent $1,000 on a red dot instead of $200 or $300 on a red dot. So there's a lot of this out there, and some people I think really drive this home, especially whenever they're looking at certain. They compare like higher end products to lower end products in this sense that, like, in a straight up one-on-one, you're gonna die if you run a Romeo 5 on a PSA rifle. You might as well not even try. You're gonna die. Go out and drop $3,000 on an L&T and buy a Trijicon ACOG and just never touch anything else. I'm like, you know what? I'm a big proponent of buy once, cry once when it comes to like your first rifle in that sense. And the idea that I think that everyone should have at least one really solid, rugged, reliable rifle, right? But I don't think that there necessarily needs to be a set price point on it, and the idea that, like, if you don't spend this amount of money on a gun, you're not getting a good gun. But like the best rifle that you can afford for whatever your realistic purpose is, and get it set up, one rifle that's really solid, that's like no matter how much you spent on it, no matter what kind of accoutrement is on there, one rifle that you would trust your life to. And then if you have more rifles after that, they can be fun guns. They can be concept guns. You can be like, oh, I put together a, Minuteman RPK. Okay, sick. Or like, oh, I want to have like, maybe I want to, plink around with this one, or, I want to do this with that gun. That's fine. As long as you have like one really solid, like, hey, if things go down, I can only grab one and I'm walking out the door with this. I think that's fine. And this is going to be kind of playing a lot on some of the trench grenade stuff. I kind of fell down the rabbit hole lately of watching some of a lot of trench grenade stuff out there. And if you haven't followed him, please go check out some of his videos. You'll see what I'm talking about. So he's got like a super hard on for crapping on PSA. I'm not sure the origins of that. But like a prime example is he's just done this torture test of the PSA dagger. He's talked shit on it for months, right? Finally puts out a series of videos shooting several thousand rounds through a PSA dagger to see when it dies. And I think after like 4,000 rounds, just one of the pins started to walk loose. Like something that like I've seen happen before on range guns when I used to work at the range, like fairly frequently. And it's just like, okay, yeah, tap that thing back in, send it back out. Like not a big deal, right? And like, oh, critical malfunction, gun's dead, gun died after 4,000 rounds. Like the gun didn't die. Like you just got to tap a pin back in. But like he uses this as an example to be like, oh, this $300 pistol, is trash. It only went 4,000 rounds. Well, first off, like one, that's pretty decent for a $300 pistol. But two, like the whole premise is him trying to be like, oh, this isn't the Glock killer you think it is, and all these PSA fanboys are, going to be so disappointed. Does the same thing like with their rifles. He doesn't do like the torture test necessarily on their rifles, but a lot of smack talk there, right? And it kind of got me thinking a little bit to where, when you have certain people like this, who to them it's like if you don't spend X amount of dollars, it's not a good rifle, or if you don't buy the 3 brands that I like, it's not a good rifle. The issue is, it's like, where's your mindset for this, right? Like, what to you is a good rifle, and why? Like, why is this a good rifle to you when another one is not? I did a YouTube video recently where I talked about that. I said, how much money should you spend on your SHTF rifle? And one of the things I brought up was, these guys will go out and do these burn downs of PSAs. Like I know Grand Thumb did one a while back, and it was just a standard PSA Freedom Kit rifle, $300-400 rifle, and I think it went like 4,000 or 5,000 rounds, something like that. And this is like no cleaning, no maintenance, just cranking. And I think it was like 4,000 or 5,000 rounds or something before they had a major issue. And the thing to me is, it's like, okay, that went 4,000 to 5,000 rounds before having major issues with this, and they put it on a full auto lower. There wasn't much of a shift in accuracy after a while. Every 1,000 rounds or so, they'd go out and shoot a couple groups, and there really wasn't that much difference from the beginning to end. Like it was pretty consistent for the most part, if I'm remembering the video correctly. I could be wrong. Go back and check and fact check me. But the idea was, this is actually pretty decent, and that it's a $400 rifle, but by nowadays, AR-15s have been popular for a long time, and a basic AR-15, like a PSA level basic level AR-15, should really be coming in around the $400 mark. because of how widespread they are and how widespread manufacturing of these things is. Anybody and their brother can produce one of these now. Most companies are. It's one of the most popular weapons platforms in the world, let alone in America. So, like, the cost of production should be relatively cheap. So saying like, oh, it's a cheap rifle, like that doesn't necessarily hold the same weight as it did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, buying a PSA was kind of a gamble. Even nowadays, like, it's still a little bit of a gamble, but way less. I would say, like, it used to be 1 in every 5 guns coming in with an issue was a PSA. Now it's like 1 in every 25, 1 in every 30. Like, it's not as common. They're producing guns in a large mass. They're going to have issues. That's plain and simple. And you get what you pay for, right? You're getting no frills, and you are getting a slightly lower level of quality control, not necessarily in the sense that it's they're purposely making a bad product, but that they're making products so fast and in such great numbers, things are going to slip through the cracks. It's going to happen. But they have a really great warranty, and they'll fix the problems. On top of that, like, it's an AR-15. Depending on what the problem is, you can probably just fix it yourself, So anyway, the point of the video that I made was, dunking on a rifle like this for $400 for only making it 4,000 to 5,000 rounds is not like the slam dunk you think it is. Like, realistically, someone who's buying a $400 rifle probably not going to be able to afford 5,000 rounds for quite some time. If you're buying a PSA rifle or something like that, like a Freedom Kit style rifle or something, or you're building a cheap sub $500-600 AR, you're probably doing it for budgetary concerns. You get the $100, Romeo Red Dot or Vortex Red Dot, whichever, version of that, of the Romeo 5, you use your flavor. You slap it on the top. You get a cheap light and a sling, and you're probably set. You go out and you shoot 100 to 200 rounds once every so often when you go to the range, and you're good. Most people are not going to be dumping thousands of rounds in some kind of, shit has hit the fan fictional scenario. We all have our fantasies of Red Dawn or whatever, right? Like oh man, the day has come. I got to don my kit and I got to go do what the Second Amendment is meant for. We all have our ideas of what this looks like and how this is going to play out. But realistically, most of us are probably going to be pretty fine with a rifle that has a lifespan of 4,000 to 5,000 rounds. And if you have a few spare parts at hand, and if you learn what you need and learn to have a few spare parts lying around, or have more than one rifle you can pull parts from, things like that, you're probably going to be pretty good in the long run. Like, if you can go a couple thousand rounds with just needing to replace gas rings, like, that's an easy fix, and gas rings are cheap. Go buy, go spend $5 and buy a handful of them. Have them on hand. Problem solved, right? So it kind of just comes down to this idea that, like, just because it's not going to last 15,000 or 30,000 rounds doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It means, like, look at the scenario you're intending to use it on. I think a lot of people get wrapped up. I know, like, the trench grenade guy, and I'm sorry if this sounds like I'm ranting against him. I am a little bit. He's a 12-year army. Well, he's not a vet. He's still in. He's been in the military for 12 years, right? He's currently a drill instructor. And I think a problem is, like, the videos that he makes, I think he's kind of institutionalized in his way of thinking from his time in the military, right? And so he's looking at rifles in the sense of, and I see this quite a bit with a lot of YouTube, in the sense of, like, I'm going to go use this rifle in a combat scenario in the same way I would if I were active duty military. The Chinese have fallen from the sky. Me and a group of my dudes have a fob. We're going to run operations. We're going to do this, right? I think your average American buying a rifle is not necessarily in that mindset of thinking. Your average American who even mentally may want to do that, right? Odds are, if something big like that's going to go down, you're probably not going off to the woods to play Goon Boys in the dark, right? Especially if you have a family. If you have a wife and children, odds are you're more like the guy who's going to be guarding the food supply and, like, taking care of your family and making sure that you're getting through things and holding down the farmstead. Because unless you are a very small portion of the population that's going to be on your own land with a group of people around you, kind of like the movie Homestead or something, if you, like look at me. I'll use myself as an example. I live in a small town in North Idaho, okay? I have several people within a 15-minute distance of me that I would consider, like, my group or whatever, right? But we all have wives and we all have families. And we're going to have to look out for, like, we're still going to have to like put food on the table somehow in any kind of, SHTF scenario, right? So we don't have the luxury of going out and, going to go do goon boy stuff in the woods and need thousands and thousands of rounds. Odds are we're going to need a rifle by the bed or in the vehicle for whatever bump in the night happens or someone gets a little froggy, right? Or, civil unrest, something like that. And we're probably not, if we have to engage any targets, we're probably not even going through a full combat load, realistically. In very few scenarios can I imagine, realistically, myself getting involved in a prolonged gun battle. Now, that being said, I want to be prepared for that. I still like having the kit. I still like having all the stuff. Like, let's admit it, dude. Like, that's the whole fun part. That's the part of why we're here, is like the LARPing, right? And we say LARPing as a negative term, but like, it's a positive thing, I think, in my eyes. Live action role playing. You're role playing, like, what would happen if this disaster were to go down? How would we act? How would we react? I think that's a good thing to LARP, right? But I think we also need to be kind of looking at it and be like, okay, so what are your realistic limitations, right? If the Chinese drop from the sky tomorrow, am I going to abandon my family to go out with the boys in the woods? Or are we going to try to get our families and dip out somewhere safe, right? And if we're doing that, are we getting engaged in 3,000 to 4,000 round gun battles? Or are we disengaging and getting away, right? So for me, I think like even in an SHTF scenario, the odds of you using 4,000 rounds and like, the odds of you getting into a situation where the longevity of your rifle being 5,000 rounds or under is a life or death scenario probably results in your death already. Like if you're in a situation where you have to realistically worry that your rifle is only rated for a 5,000 round life versus a 10,000 round life, and it's a life or death situation because of it, you're probably already in a really bad spot. Okay? That's just my kind of take on this. So the real question, like going into this, is like, what do you actually need, right? Now, like I said in the beginning, I think everyone should have one really solid rifle setup. But that really solid rifle setup has gotten a lot more affordable over the last several years, right? It's like the PSA Sabres seem to be pretty awesome rifles. The M&P Sport 3 that came out recently. There's a lot of rifles in that $1,000 mark that are actually pretty solid. Even some in like that $800 mark they're fairly decent. Get yourself a decent optic on there, and you could put yourself together some really good kit. Like, for example, right? It's all about, in my head, with this idea of consumerism, not that you go out and buy and always get the latest stuff, but like just be smart with your money. Right? It's like, do you really need the latest and greatest, like, hot thing in optics? Maybe, maybe you don't have an optic, and maybe your optics are so outdated that is the case, right? But odds are you're probably fine with like the Romeo 5 red dot you have and a magnifier. Maybe you want to get a little bit better PID, and so you want a 1 to 6 or a 1 to 8 or something. Like, nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is, like, you guys have seen this before on the show, that this is my Daniel defense, right? So Daniel Defense, I'm not sure what they go for now, but when I bought mine, I think it was around $1,800, right? Altogether, between the scope, the suppressor, the tax stamp, everything else that's on here, it's probably a couple grand tied up into this. Probably, I'd say, at least as much that I spent on the gun that I spent on everything else, at least, right? So this is my super, super solid, rugged, reliable, like, do it all. Now, that... Let's just cap it at 3. Let's say $3,000, right? Would you be better served getting something like that, or would you be better served getting something like an $800 AR, a decent optic, chest rigs, magazines, med kits, tons of ammo, things like that, and have a complete setup for $3,000, right? The movie War Dogs has a great scene in it where they kind of break down how much stuff it takes to arm a U.S. Military member, right, going overseas, like a U.S. combat infantryman. It's like, I think the movie was like almost $18,000, right? Do you have $18,000 to drop on kit? Do you? Like, this is what I'm getting at, right? It's like this consumerism, like buy. Get the top of the line stuff. You need to be a special operator. That's Navy SEALs use this kit. You need to use this kit. Are you a Navy SEAL? Are you doing Navy SEAL shit? Probably not, right? Do you need Navy SEAL shit? Probably not, right? Are you doing helo raids? with like 12 dudes in the dark with quad nods? Probably not. Like, let's be a little more realistic in the sense of like, and I know this is kind of like a weirdly a controversial thing in the gun space because I'm like trying to like simplify things down and not like doom and gloom it, which is weird. But do what do you actually need realistically as a normal person, right? What do you actually need as a minimum, like just to get by? Because here's the thing, right? You got tiers of people. You got people who just want to be prepared. They want to have weapons and ammo and food and water and medical supplies. Just in like in the sense of like just being able to like be prepared for disasters and scenarios. In the sense that like they're not planning on going out and fighting the Chinese one on one or going out and doing like missions and raids. They just want to make sure that like if anything goes down, they can board up the windows, they can eat food and water and guard their garden while the zombies come. That's the average person, right? They got a wife, they got a kids, maybe a couple boys with them, a couple guys that like, similar mindset, but they're not out there running ops. They're not out there running operations or doing combat raids, right? Other guys out there take it a little bit more seriously. They're doing harder training. They're doing squad level tactics. They're planning on more combat oriented stuff. If that's the case, like your needs are different than the person who just wants to get stuff to be prepared, right? You have different needs based on different mindsets and different missions, right? Think of like the idea of like packing mission essential kit, bringing the stuff that you need for your job on your mission. Okay. So with that, like, it's important to be like, what is your role? And well, first off, what is this scenario that you're preparing for? When you say like, okay, I want to get prepared. I want to have my loadout, right? What is the scenario you're preparing for? As someone who has spent a lot of time and money on gear and a lot of time and money on training, things like this, I have different loadouts of different sets of gear, things like this, based on different things. Like, I'm a big fan right now of load-bearing equipment in the sense of like belt and harness setups, like Alice kit and things like that, right? Jungle kit, things like that. Big fan of that right now. So if something were to happen, I would probably wear that more than I would maybe a plate carrier and battle belt, depending upon the scenario, right? And in a lot of cases, I'm really starting to get into right now, like just simple chest rig setups, right? Like something simple, just simple, quick, throw it on. In the idea that like, if I'm more realistically just going to be out and about with my family or things like this, and trying to defend myself and my family, or defend the homestead, or even just worst case scenario, the enemy's at the gates, we got to rally the town against the marauders, whatever. My gear is going to be massively different for these different scenarios. So, like, let's look, what scenario are you preparing for? What is the realistic use case scenario for you and your gear? What is most likely to happen? You can always be prepared for something worse, and I advocate that you do. I think in recent years, my like view on the idea of like prepping and things like this has gone from like the sky is falling to being a little bit more grounded in reality. So like what kind of scenarios are you prepared for, right? What kind of scenarios do you envision happening? Is it a matter of civil unrest? Okay, if it's civil unrest, are you going out with the guys and, doing CQB to clear out bad guys? Or are you staying at home with your family and making sure that like bricks aren't flying through windows? What scenario are you realistically looking at? So let's establish that. Now, what is your role and responsibility in that scenario? Again, if you're looking at more of a combat-oriented thing, your needs are going to be different than the person who's like, I'm a dad and I'm just going to be at home with my family, right? If you're at home with your family, as long as the rifle is reliable, right? If you have like a reliable PSA build, whatever, great, that's solid. Prime example, something like this, right? This is a old palmetto upper with an Anderson lower that I built years ago. I put a Timney trigger in that Daniel I had on earlier, and so the Daniel's trigger is in here. I've got my brake on here because I have a suppressor that slaps on the top of it. It's a Yankee Hill, and then I've got a simple stream light, right? This is a low, I said low income. This is a low entry build. This is not expensive, right? Not a lot of things in here are expensive. I built a lot of this stuff up over time. I've got a bootleg bolt carrier in there to help with gas mitigation whenever I'm shooting suppressed. But something like this, right, is probably plenty fine for your average person, even if it's, imagine this being a 16-inch rifle, whatever. Something like this is plenty fine for the average person, right? Simple red dot, basic 16-inch gun, totally fine for home defense, right? If that's your mindset, which I think a vast majority of people, that's where they're at. More people, I think, are getting involved in the idea of like the modern Minuteman and being in a team setting and things like that. But there's still a vast number of people out there, and some of you guys that watch that, like, you're just more like, I want to have a cool setup for me and like defending my house. That's it. Like defending my property, defending my house, whatever. That's plenty fine for the most people. And realistically, that's going to get you through whatever you need to get through, right? Having all the bells and whistles like I have on my Daniel is fantastic if you can swing it, right? And I think that's kind of the point I'm trying to get to here is if you can swing it, I'm not going to stop you from buying more expensive stuff. But like this idea to just buy is dumb, right? Like how many times have you seen where it's like a couple years back, plate carriers, like a couple years, like a decade ago, 10 years ago, during the GWAT, plate carriers all pimped out with everything you could ever carry on them. That was the trend. So everyone's buying high-end plate carriers, doing all this shit, blah, 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 right? Then slick plate carriers was the thing. And it was like, I got to go buy this new plate carrier now because I already got one. I need another one. And I got to go load it all, like take everything down, slim it all up. Battle belts are in now. Got to go get me one of them. I'm going to die if I don't have one. Right? So it's things like that, right? Like, oh, Jungle Kit's back. Let's go. I got to put together Jungle Kit. And so it's like this constant cycle of like what's hot and what's not and wanting to stay trendy leads you to spending a whole lot of money on stuff that like, did you really need that? Like, what does that accomplish that what you already have doesn't, right? And believe me, I'm just as guilty as getting in on that buying cycle as everybody else is, but let's assume that you have a justification for it. You said, you know what? I do need this. I do need a chest rig because I don't want to have to wear heavy armor everywhere. I don't always need, 2 plates, and I can go out and, 2 plates in a carrier and with a bunch of stuff on it. I just need something light. I need something light, a couple mags, a few odds and ends that I need. I don't need, that for whatever purpose I need. I need a chest rig. Okay, cool. So if you've established an actual need for it, not a want but a need, now you could look at it and be like, okay, what do I need this chest rig to do? And I bring this up because I see a lot of guys who dump mad money into things where like the same thing is accomplished in a much cheaper way. So like, again, if it's your money, spend it how you want. If you want to buy $600 Spirit System chest rig, that's you. That's your call. You are totally capable of doing so. Okay? No one is going to stop you. However, there are cheaper alternatives out there. For example, the TAPS chest rigs are huge right now. Marine Corps flat chest rig, strips across. You got 7 spots for mags, bunch of molly on the front. You can make most of what these high-end companies are charging for like $100. If you already have some pouches and you get the TAPS rig for like $50 to $70, slap all it all together, you're good. Chicom stuff. You can get this stuff for like $20 and mod the hell out of it, right? So like 308. I got a G3, I got an M1A, right? Trying to find affordable 308 gear is kind of a pain in the ass, right? But I go on Amazon and eBay and I find this guy. This is a 7-cell mag carrier. It was originally meant for 20-round AK mags that would go in the SKSs that took AK mags in China. And it fits G3 mags and M1A mags fantastically. So this holds 7. So usually what I do is I do 6, and then the last one, I'll throw in my radio, right? Or I'll throw in a radio, and then on my belt, I'll have, my carry pistol, 2 mags, and I'll have a fanny pack of medical. And that's a pretty solid loadout, right? This thing, I got it for like $18, something like that, right? So this guy, instead of using these crappy toggles, you just go buy some Velcro, slap it on there, right? This is literally like heat gun to it. And then I was going to sew it at some point, but the heat gun is like basically got it stuck on there, and it's stuck on there pretty well. And it's worked so far, and it holds G3 mags fantastically. And you can do a little, pull tab thing on them if you really want to get them out of there. But it works great. You could run AR mags out of here too if you wanted. And, add the SKS rigs are very similar. And it's just a simple canvas harness. It's just simple canvas straps. If you really wanted to, you could cut these, add on some buckles, make it a placard, throw it on a slick carrier. On the back, you usually just tie them. Well, what we've done is we've just kind of changed the back, and just added a buckle, right? To make it easier to put on and off. Super simple things. Tie, Ranger band a tourniquet to it. Is it fancy? No. Is it high end? No. Is it cheap? Absolutely. Does it free up money for you to get other gear that you might need? Absolutely. Like personally, I think that there's nothing wrong with looking cool. I'll give you that, right? Everyone's got a little bit of drip every now and then. And as a fan of weird military surplus stuff and camo patterns, believe me, I've spent way more money than I should have on some dumb camo pattern from a country that doesn't exist anymore. But there are alternatives out there to where you're like, man, I really want to get this cool stuff, but I don't have the money. You just gotta look and find alternatives, okay? This here, that SKS rig I was talking about. This guy here, right? This is a 10-cell SKS chest rig, okay? This thing, what I'll usually do is I have 20 rounders in here because my 300 blackout I mark with 300 and I run them in the 20s and I do little pull tabs on them, right? Slap those guys in there. And they sunk in a little bit low, so I just cut up some foam, put it at the bottom so they have something to sit on, right? And usually the last one on either end, this one here I'll usually throw 2 Glock mags into, and this one gets a radio. So I can get 8 mags out of that. Unless they have other kit with me, and then I'll just run it straight. And so I got 10 mags on there. That's 200 rounds of 300 blackout. You could run 30-round AR mags in there. You do have to mod the chest rig a little bit, but you can do that, right? So I think learning these skills of, hey, how can I modify my gear, and getting some cheap stuff like this and playing around with it, doing a little bit of your own sewing kit stuff or adding and subtracting things to it, you can get really creative and create what you actually need for your needs with that if you just take a little bit of time and ingenuity to do it. And I think that's a big part of this is that maybe it's just that I grew up on the poorer side of life and have never really been someone who had a ton of disposable income, that I've kind of had to get this kind of stuff and scrap together before, later I get stuff that's better, absolutely. But it's I've learned that there's nothing necessarily wrong with this gear. Is it a little outdated? Sure. Can you make it work? Absolutely. There's a lot of things you can do to make this effective and to make it work. Is it better than nothing? Absolutely. There's a dude on YouTube, I think it's CivDiv actually. I think it's CivDiv. He was a former Marine, and he fought in the Middle East. I think it was he went to Afghanistan, Afghanistan or Iraq, came home, got out of the Marine Corps, joined the Peshmerga, fought with the Kurds, came back. I think he fought with them twice, 2 different units of the Kurds against ISIS. Then he comes back, and now he's fighting in Ukraine. And he put out an excellent video that talks about how he went to war in Ukraine with a $9 airsoft chest rig. He talks about being in Iraq and watching dudes cut up BDUs and use them to sew and make their own kit and gear because they didn't have it, or whatever they needed wasn't specific enough, right? These guys are going through actual combat scenarios that's relevant combat using cheap, crappy equipment and upgrading it over time or swapping out stuff when they need it, but getting something, right, to get started. And so I guess my whole point of this is, if you can afford it, I'm not stopping you, right? If you can afford it, I think there's nothing wrong with going out and getting good, high-quality kit. But I think that there's this idea out there that the more you spend equals better equipment. More, it has to be better because I paid more for it, right? And while that may be true to a certain extent with certain things, such as glass quality on scopes and the ability, the type of reticles that you get, or maybe quality control on certain items, the vast majority of people are going to be well served with the cheaper stuff, realistically. Again, if you're the kind of guy who's I want to have a rifle and a pistol, and I want to be able to set up and defend my home and, guard what's mine, one of those Chi-Com chest rigs will probably do you just fine. Like a Chinese, the actual Chi-Com chest rig, where it's got three cells, one with 2 mags in it each, and then 2 grenade pouches, something like that, or something like the ones I had on here, or even some Condor stuff. Realistically, that's probably going to be fine. If you're doing stuff more serious, and you're training more often, and you're putting your stuff through more rugged use, yeah, you're going to want a little bit higher end stuff. But the other thing too is I've been really surprised. I have a Condor chest rig that I got, I don't know, probably a decade ago. It was like one of the first pieces of gear I bought off of Amazon. It's basically a taps rig, but with all the pouches already sewn into it, right? That thing's held up for a decade. I'm really surprised. I've run the crap out of that thing, trying to see like how far I can like beat it up, going out and doing FTXs in the woods, doing trainings in the woods, doing all kinds of stuff with the boys, and like never can't seem to like destroy it yet. And it's still going strong. So again, like that's a cheaper piece of equipment that's still doing everything I need it to do, and I didn't have to spend $600 on the Spirit System chest rig. You know, there's some really good stuff out there, absolutely, and there's some really good stuff out there that like if I had all the money in the world, I would probably buy, you know. But one, I don't have all that money in the world. Your average American is not buku, yeah, he's like not swimming in the cash, you know. And so when you get these guys who are basically telling you like if you don't have this piece of equipment, you're gonna die, or if you don't spend this amount of money on a rifle or this amount of money on this thing, you're gonna die. That ain't the case, man. like yo, look at all these gangbangers running around with high points. You know, they're killing plenty of people. I'm not advocating you go out and buy a high point, but I'm saying it ain't the price of the gun that works, dude. You know, a bullet out of a $20 pistol is gonna kill you just as dead as a bullet out of a $2,000 pistol. You know, there's a meme I saw today that perfectly covers this. You know, you could spend 3 grand on a staccato, or buy $1,000 rifle, buy 1,000 rounds of ammo, buy an optic, buy a chest rig, buy some mags, buy med kit, go out and train, pay for the gas, pay for the food, pay for some beers with the boys for 3 grand. You know, like again, look at this, right? Everything all together. If you have $3,000, let's just say this simply, you have $3,000, right? Whatever your budget may be, right? Let's say you have $3,000 disposable income. You get your tax return. Would you be better served getting this and that alone, or getting something like this, a chest rig, a med kit, training, ammo, supplies, food, water, medical, backup heat sources, and everything else? Now, obviously, the answer to that is going to depend on where you are in life and where you are on this journey, right? I know I've kind of just been spent the last little bit of time ranting, but I think there's a lot of like elitism in the gun world, right? A lot of like, oh, if we don't take you seriously because you're not decked out in 15K worth of cry precision. Okay, whatever. That's your prerogative. But you know, when you look at this stuff, right? I think if you're someone who's just starting out, someone who's new to this space, who's trying to do the best you can, right? I know starting out, I didn't have a lot of money. I still don't have a lot of money, but it's like, you know, I know like some people in life, like you're just in a position where like you don't have a ton, you know, but you want to get the best you can for what you have. Would you be better served getting something more middle of the road, like reliable but affordable, right? And spending more money on getting out of debt, on getting better gear, on medical, on food, on water, on having tools, on being prepared all around, right? As a prepared citizen. You know, fixing that issue on your car that you've had for a while that you've been putting off. Um, you know, things like that, where that money better be served, kind of going all around there, right? Or would it be better served, you know, if you've got all those boxes checked, if you're like, dude, I've got 6 months food and water, we're good. My cars are all up to date. We solid. Everything in my house is fixed. We're good. I don't have any debt. I'm in a great financial position. Everything's squared away. If the shit hits the fan tomorrow, I'm good for at least 3 to 6 months. Fuck it, dude. Go buy the rifle. I ain't stopping you. Fuck, I'm not your financial advisor. Don't take financial advice from me. You know, but it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, don't be pressured into dumping mad money into shit because Instagram and YouTube tells you it's cool, right? And again, I will acknowledge the little bit of hypocrisy here in the sense that, like, yes, I have YouTube videos where I am promoting certain products, right? Or maybe not promoting, but at least reviewing and like giving more, like, hey, check this out, right? Because they were sent to me by a company. So I guess like the main point I'm trying to get to with this is that there's a lot of push out there to buy. Oh, you have this cheap stuff. You're just a poor, just stupid poor. Ugh, poor. Oh, you don't have this super high end everything else. Blah 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 blah. Who cares, dude? Like, who cares? Don't let people intimidate you out there just to look cool or get mad drip or like, oh, you don't have an $800 red dot. I mean, it's the weirdest like mean girls bullshit in the gun community, which is really weird to me. Like for a community that's all about we got to get more people in, we got to get them shooting, we got to get them, get them squared away, and it's like. Some dude rolls in with a PSA with a Romeo 5 and you just shit down his throat because he's poor or because he couldn't afford to get, the higher end stuff yet. Or maybe he doesn't know, and he's like, or like better yet, that just works for him. It meets his needs and you got to shit all over him because he doesn't have, like a Daniel or a BCM with like a $1,200 optic. Like that's the thing I'm getting to is that I see a lot of that type of stuff in this space, and then it turns a lot of people away, and it makes a lot of people be like, "Well, fuck you guys, I don't want to deal with you," you know. And there's a balance between like, yeah, if you got some dude who's like wearing like the finest Chinesium out there, and you're like, "Hey man, look, I know, maybe that stuff's working for you right now. There is better stuff out there," or like, "Hey, there's a known flaw with this thing," or like, "Have you ever thought about this?" Right? There's ways to do it, and that's not being an asshole. Right. And that's the thing I think is there's a lot of that on YouTube where there's a lot of like, oh, look, you need this to be cool, blah, blah, blah kind of crap. And then that's kind of where I'm going with it, with this rant is that get what works for you. Right. Don't take my advice. Don't take some internet dude's advice. I mean, you can listen to the reviews, you can listen to what we're saying about certain things. But if I'm like, hey, you have to buy this rifle or you die. Don't fucking listen to that person. Prime example of this, right? Helmets. Okay? You've got some pretty badass OpScore helmets out there. You can put all your gadgets and gizmos and shit on, right? They're also extremely expensive, right? Even like hard-headed veterans. I think they're like $500-600 a helmet, right? I have, right over here, if I can grab it. This is, pull all this crap up so you can see. This is a PAGST helmet I got off of somebody with a duffel bag worth of old surplus crap for $50. Had a whole bunch of stuff in there. LBVs, Alice kit, everything else, and a helmet for like $50, right? It's got the mount up front for the NVGs. I have it currently covered in some winter camo stuff I'm testing out. I kind of did a video a while back on making like my own netting for winter, kind of off like the Panama style. But this is an old school helmet, right? The downfall of this is electronic ear pro, not very easy to wear with this helmet. But you have things like the ACHs and the MICH helmets, right? The actual more combat style helmets. They're not the cool high speed, bump helmets or fast helmets that come up over the years, things like that. But they're effective, they work, and they're under $200. You can go out and get like a Mitch helmet right now for like $150 on eBay, like all day long, So there are options out there that may not be the coolest, most trendiest thing now, or maybe they're even surplus. Because surplus, the cool thing about surplus is like that shit works. Like Alice, I use the shit out of my Alice kit because it works. Yeah, it's old, but you're like, one, you look great. First off, like it's just aesthetic as hell. Secondly, it works. It gets the job done. It doesn't do anything that your crap doesn't do. That your crap does. It doesn't. It's not missing anything. Carries all the same equipment, and you can pick it up at the surplus store for like $4. So, like, my whole point of this is that be smart with your money. Don't be the guy who feels like you have to be the drippiest dude on the range. If you've got the money for it, fuck it, do it, right? But if you're like your average person who's like, hey, I got other shit to worry about financially, don't be pressured into having to buy all this cool high-end stuff. Get what works for you. If that's a Condor chest rig and a PSA rifle, you get what you pay for, right? That's an understanding. Understand that, like, yes, realistically, there are some things that maybe you will outperform yours. But in the same sense, that's like, look, me and my wife drive our 2005 Acura MDX. It's not a sports car. It's not a truck. It's going to be outperformed by a lot of things on the road, But it's got 3 rows, holds the kids, and it's great for grabbing groceries, and it's a smooth ride. It works for me, I don't feel like I need to have a brand new 2025 Dodge Ram. If you're a sponsor out there and you want to throw one my way, though, I'm not going to say no. But it works for us. So have that kind of mentality, like what works for you? Like today, like the last couple weeks, I've been, bored at work or doing something, and every now and then you get a break and you scroll through like, oh, what's the deals on Palmetto today, or what's the deals on, Optics Planet or whatever website you go to, right? And you're like, oh, what's going on? And I'm sitting there and I keep looking at it. I'm like, ooh, I could get that. That's on sale. But I'm like, but what am I going to do with it? Do I really need that? Do I like? Could I better put that $100 somewhere else, or set it aside maybe towards nods? Like this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, right? Is like being more financially stable and getting more to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to get what works now and what works for me. And I maybe, if it's not that great, well, I can save up money for stuff later. I'm at that point in my life now where, I realized like when I was younger, I was like, just buy, 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 buy. We'll make money later. And I'm at a point now where I'm like, I don't need that. I don't need that thing. Like believe me, I haven't. This for people who know me. I haven't bought a new gun in forever. It's been like at least since I moved. I haven't bought a new gun in a while, and getting the itch a little bit. I'll be honest. I want to go buy something, but it's like I'll sit there. I'm like, yeah, but if I get that, then I gotta go. Like I was looking at Classic Firearms had some surplus revolvers the other day, and I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. I don't have a 357, but I was like, then I gotta go buy a bunch of 357 ammo. And there's a whole bunch of money. There's a whole money pit that I don't want to go down to where the cheapest thing I'm going to have at the end of the day is the gun. And I don't actually need that gun. And I know this is super controversial and like counter to like, gun culture of like go out and buy, 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 buy. But it's like, I'm kind of getting to the point where like I'm less of a collector these days and more of like trying to find out practical uses and then being like, okay, that $350 for that revolver, could I better spend it on a $350 piece of kit or on several pieces of kit that are, or maybe there's $350 worth of small things that I need that could like be improvements to my stuff. And that's just kind of where I'm at with that. So that's my rant. Thank you guys for listening. Again, the main point of this is just that, be wise with your money. Don't be intimidated by people who are like, you have to buy, buy, buy. Don't fall for the consumerism trap. Just because it's the latest and greatest thing doesn't mean you absolutely have to have it. Have some patience, figure out what it is you really need, and get what's best for you. If that does mean getting out and getting the latest and greatest thing, so be it. If that means maybe you're getting surplus, or maybe you're like, you know what, I think I'm actually good. I don't think I actually need any of that. That's a really good mindset to have. So keep that with you guys. I will see you on the next one. Peace.